You're listening to the Toolstation Western League podcast with Ian Knockholds and Tom Hiscott.
Welcome to episode 37 of the Toolstation Western League podcast with me, Ian Knockholds, and I'm delighted to be joined on the line by Tom Hiscott, the author of the Western League Bulletin. Hello, Tom. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks. How about you?
I'm all right. Did you eat too many Easter eggs?
I managed to have one, yeah. So yeah, good weekend. Obviously, plenty to keep an eye on football-wise, and yeah, plenty of chocolate consumed. How about you?
Well, it was. I can't believe how much football we've got to talk about on this week's podcast. It's an absolute. It's chock-a-block, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It puts the Easter chock into chock-a-block. Yeah, my weekend was very pleasant. I did manage to catch the El Multico.
Oh.
Yesterday. Now, do you know what the El Multico is?
I think I'm aware of which game you were at, but I don't. That's not something that's ever made it onto my radar. So you have to enlighten me.
Well, it needs to be on your radar because the El Multico is up there with some of the great games of our time, like El Clasico, and of course the Coalfield Classico, which we'll be talking about later in the podcast. But I went to Warminster for their game against Devizes, and I follow Warminster on social media. They got a fantastic fan site as well as the club site. And one of the debates they're having a few months ago was about changing the nickname of the team from the Red and Blacks to the Malt Men. Mm. And this whole issue with the Malt Men goes back to the history of the town and obviously the history of malt and brewing. And yes, their sponsor is Warminster Maltings, who produce a beer. And then, of course, beer made me think about Wadworth's. They're obviously famous for their beer. So El Multico was born. Now, I mean, I don't think anybody else has ever called the fixture El Multico. Probably nobody ever will again. But I thought it appealed to me. Anyway, I had a very nice time yesterday. I didn't get a chance to watch any of the Good Friday games. I know that's where we'll kick off this week's coverage. But that's because I was wandering around Legoland.
That's pleasant enough.
It was lovely, and I was glued to my Toolstation Western League app to look at all the fixtures coming in as I was wandering around queuing for 40 minutes for an ice cream and watching the Pirates of Skeleton Bay for the third consecutive showing. But anyway, so plenty of great football to discuss. Today's interviews on the podcast are with the Hallen manager, Ray Johnston, and also we're going to be speaking for the first time this season to the manager of Bishop Sutton, Sam Downs. But without any further ado, Tom, we will start with those fixtures on Friday, Good Friday, of course, while I was wandering around Legoland. And yes, we'll kick off with a 7-goal thriller, a Wiltshire derby. It was one of the games that I talked about on last week's podcast. It is, of course, Bradford Town against Westbury United. Yeah,
7 goals, 5 of them coming for the home side. A big 5-2 win for Bradford over Westbury, who've come unstuck a little bit of late. Still a fantastic season for them, of course, but the end of the season's not been too brilliant. But for Bradford, a big home win. Simon Prangley, who's seems to score a lot of penalties, especially over the last couple of months. He put them ahead pretty early before Tom Stocks then scored from a set piece to double the lead. Westbury lost Callum Demkip. Obviously, we know him. He's had an excellent season in front of goal. He was given a red card, and that made their task obviously a little bit tougher. Matt Morris extending Bradford's lead soon after. Westbury did get back into the game. Dan Kovacs at the end of the first half, but Bradford then pushed on after the break. Will Haleston. And he scored twice, either side of a goal from Steve Holbert. So Westbury did end with 2, but a big 5-2 win for Bradford.
Now our next game features Clevedon Town, and the visitors were Hallen.
Yeah, Hallen. This was the first of their 2 wins over Easter. A 2-1 victory away at Clevedon, moving up to 14th following this victory. And it was a pretty frantic start to the game. Sid Camper putting Clevedon ahead after just 12 minutes before George Binding levelled the scores 4 minutes later. So it was 1-1 after just 15 minutes. But then with just over 10 minutes left on the clock, Jack Mills was given his marching orders. So Hallen down to 10 men. But they managed to somehow muster a late winner, Aaron Anglin, netting from the penalty spot to hand Hallen a 2-1 victory away at Clevedon.
Well, as you rightly say, Tom, that was the first of 2 wins for Hallen over the Easter bank holiday period. So I started my conversation with Hallen manager Ray Johnston by congratulating him on a very happy Easter.
Yes, it's a good end of the season. We were languishing about sort of fifth from bottom, and I think those 6 points have pushed up back up towards mid-table now. So, obviously, if you'd have given me those two results at the start of Easter, I'd have bitten your hand off.
Yeah, because Clevedon and Buckland obviously have some pedigree in the Premier Division. Obviously, Buckland aren't very Buckland at the moment, I think it would be fair to say. But, you've still got to beat these teams, and you're obviously managing to keep your players' attention right up until the end of the season. I mean, do you think that with some of the sides in the Western League, there is an element that some of the players are on the beach already?
Yes, it's a tough time to motivate your players, especially when you've got nothing to play for, but then that's when, I suppose, we earn all that money that we get paid, I guess. As far regarding Clevedon, no one's played as well against us than Clevedon did on Boxing Day, so it was really nice to get one back on them, because when they came to us Boxing Day, they absolutely put us to the sword. I think they beat us 3-0, and we were lucky to get nil on the day. So it was nice to get the one back over on them. Regarding Buckland, I think they were under strength, as were we, to be honest. However, like you just said, you've still got to beat these teams, and my record against Buckland isn't great anyway. So it was nice to get points in a game that I felt that we dominated pretty much from right at the start till injury time, really.
The fixture gods haven't been that kind to you, have they, in April? Because, before Buckland and Clevedon, you had Bradford and Westbury, two sides that are also going well at the top of the table. I mean, I know you lost both of those games, but you only lost them narrowly, didn't you?
And I think on reflection of both games, we definitely deserve minimum 4 points out of those games. How we lost the Westbury game, I'm still shaking my head about it now, if I'm being honest. We were really good on the day, and it was a bizarre game. I think there was like 3 penalties in the first 10 minutes. It was a strange game. We should have won it. As for the Bradford game, we were good for. We've let in an injury time winner, which again was disappointing. But there you go. You have your ups and downs, don't you? It's certainly something I need to look at towards next season, because we've let 19 points slip in the last 5 minutes of games over the course of the season. 19 points onto our tally makes it look a lot better and more realistic, I feel, for how we play.
You talk about the 19 points there, but you're only 4 points off of 10th. And I suppose if I'd have offered you a top 10 finish this season, would you have taken it?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think the club would have taken it, in the sense of, I think it's the highest points total we've had for something like 7 or 8 years, I believe. So I think that, especially with all the instability that there's been over the last few years, I think they'd have snapped your hand off. For me personally, and the group of players I've got, if I can get everyone available, the way we finished isn't really ideal for where I want to be. And I hope that the players understand that too, and understand that I'll be making more demands from them in terms of how we're looking to be next season. So
you've already got next season in mind?
Any manager at any level would already have an eye on next season and already start feathering their nest. In preparation for next season. So, if you're doing your job right, you're already speaking to players, you're already in the ear of people, and you're looking to build for next season already.
I mean, when you reflect on how this season's gone, what's the biggest challenge you think you've faced?
Getting everybody available on the same weekend. Fulfilling fixtures, getting sufficient players in your squad. It's been quite tough, trying to, with the logistics of everything, trying to get, I don't think I've named the same squad in consecutive games all season. So if everyone's available every week, we could be a side to, put up a fight against anyone. But the biggest battle is trying to make sure everyone's available at the same time.
Now, if we have a look at the top of the table, it looks like that the title race is going right down to the wire. Who do you fancy?
If you're asking me who I fancy, I think Willand. I would really like Plymouth to win the league, just because it's so bleeding far away. Just for purely selfish travelling reasons, I would love Plymouth to win it, and hope that we never have to go there again. In terms of who I put my punditry head on, if you will, I think I'd be tipping Willand.
Now, before we get to the end of the season, of course, there's the small matter for you of a game away at Bridport. I mean, there's added spice to that, isn't there? Because both of you are sort of locked together in the table. So if you beat them, you'll go above them.
Yeah, I think they're just a bit ahead of us on goal difference. I think at the minute, I think whoever wins finishes 12th. Obviously, they've got the draw. They've got the draw as well in that. It's a hard game. I like the guy down there. I like the guy Adam Fricker. He's a good guy. Played with him before, and they're coming. They're having a strong end of the season as well. I think since they've got the lad Butcher back from Street, I think he's scored a few goals from them. I think their results have changed dramatically since. So that's obviously something we keep an eye on. But yeah, why not? It's generally a good surface down there, so we'll go in there, enjoy it. There's not really a great deal riding on it in terms of going up or going down who we're playing. So hopefully the lads can enjoy it and then have about 6-7 weeks off before we get back into pre-season.
Now, I know you're a man who keeps abreast of football politics, and this season we've seen a few hot potatoes. Most recently, we know that there are going to be sin bins introduced into the Western League next season, and of course we've also had some announcements from the Football Association about league reorganisation, which isn't necessarily going to affect the Premier Division very much, but I just wondered, do you have any thoughts on sort of how the administrators are managing the game at the moment?
In terms of the sin bin, as I believe it, and you may correct me, if it's a sin bin for dissent, then I'm all for that in terms of the playing, in terms of players. If I'm being honest, I probably am hard to deal with from the referee's perspective myself, but I do encourage my players to don't do as I do as I say, and I don't like my players getting booked and sent off for dissent, and to save their bookings as such for a tactical yellow or a hard tackle. I think booking dissent is a waste. So if that encourages players to keep their mouth shut, so be it. I know I need to probably look at myself and lead from the front a little bit in terms of what I expect from my team. However, I think it's a good idea, and I fully endorse it. As long as the people that are enforcing it do their job properly, and that's my only question about whether making sure that the actual law is enforced properly.
You might be difficult to deal with from the referee's perspective, but you're certainly not difficult to deal with from the commentator's perspective. We've got the Les Phillips Cup final coming up. You're going to join me again in the commentary box, and it promises to be an absolute belter, doesn't it? Plymouth Parkway against Woolland. I'm really looking forward to it.
For me, in terms of when we played against them, I think they're the two teams in our league that I believe are most suited to going up, just because I think both of those teams are quite robust in their style, with some very good players as well. I think so for me, in terms of what I like watching football, they're the most sort of experienced, sort of the know-how, the bit of nastiness if need be. I think both of those teams have got each base covered that I would like to see. So for me, they're probably the two top sides in terms of going up, and will be the most suited to going up, I believe.
And of course, it's going to be an absolute belter of a final with the two of them there.
Can't wait! It's going to be a great day. It's going to be a great game. It's going to be like a really, really big game. Probably the two right sides are in the final. On the form book, if you're a sponsor, you'd be happy. May the best team win on the day.
Well, I look forward to your company down in Sherborne on May the 6th. I'm sure the weather will be glorious, and I think we'll get a huge crowd for that as well. But of course, anybody who can't attend the Les Phillips Cup final will be able to hear Ray and myself on an online commentary. So I look forward to seeing you then, and thanks very much for your time.
No problem. And who wouldn't want to listen to our pearls of wisdom that we offer everybody anyway?
Well,
I think I'd even think about not going to the final and actually listening to us instead.
Well, I mean, certainly if you remember our commentary from last year, there were three teams in the final, because not only did we have Shepton, Mallet and Buckland, but for most of the game I was commentating on Street as well. Yeah, that was quite funny. That was a source of amusement for me, that was. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure it was a source for amusement for many people listening. But anyway, Ray, thanks ever such a lot for your time. Well done this season. Pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time.
and my thanks to Ray for his time. Now, the final game we're going to look at in the Premier Division on Good Friday featured Shepton Mallet, and the visitors were Odd Down.
Yeah, the first of their two home games over the Easter period. This one going in their favour, a big 4-1 win for Shepton Mallet at home to Odd Down. And one of the star players in the Premier Division this season had a good afternoon. It was Tyson Pollard. He scored a hat trick for the home side in their big win. He's among the top scorers this season. And a successful afternoon on Good Friday for Shepton Mallet. 4-1 winners at home to Odd Down.
So now we take a look at the fixtures in the First Division, and we kick off with Ashton and Backwell United. They were at home to lowly Portishead.
Yeah, and it was a close affair, this one. Ashton and Backwell eventually running out winners, but it was two very late goals for them. A 2-1 victory eventually at home to Portishead. And it was two pretty regular fixtures on the score sheet for them. It was Dan Elson and then Callum Townsend. He's their leading marksman this season. So Ashton Backwell 2-1 winners over Portishead.
Now, Bristol Telephones in desperate need for points at this stage of the season. Of course, they're at the bottom of the First Division. We will be having a look at the league tables in this podcast to have a check on what's going on at both ends of both divisions. But Bristol Telephones really did need to get something from their game on Good Friday against Longwell Green Sports. Did they manage it, Tom?
Unfortunately not. They managed to score twice, but Longwell Green obviously having a fantastic end to the season. Scored 3, so obviously they running out winners, and it was Courtney Charles scoring twice for the away side in that win. He had a really good Easter, scoring in both matches, both away wins for Longwell Green Sports. So this was the first of them, and obviously as you say, Bristol Telephones desperately in need of points, but came unstuck 3-2 at home to Longwell Green Sports on Friday.
Now, the final game we're going to take a look at in the First Division is, again, another one of the matches that I talked about on last week's podcast. It is, of course, the Coalfield Classico between Radstock Town, the Miners, and Welton Rovers, the pride of Midsummer Norton, the Green Army. This game was played at Southfields Recreation Ground in front of a crowd of 291, making it the third biggest attendance in the Western League on Good Friday. Only Plymouth Parkway at 421 and Bridgewater Town could muster bigger attendances for this. Two sides really with nothing to play for other than local bragging rights in this game, Tom. Who got them?
And it went to Welton. A 2-1 win away at Radstock, their first win at the Southfields in 5 years. So a momentous afternoon for the Welton team and their fans. Obviously, a pretty good season for them, finishing probably top half, and Radstock a 3-match winning run coming into this as well. So Welton up against it, but they managed to knock them off. 4 minutes into the game, Sam Stoppard gave Welton a really early lead, with Aaron Sevier then adding a second 25 minutes from time, so putting Welton in control. Obviously Sevier having a fantastic season. Radstock did manage to get one back, final 15 minutes, but they unable to find an equaliser. And this left them needing points on Easter Monday, which they did manage to secure to make sure they are safe in the division. But the bragging rights on Good Friday went to Welton, a 2-1 win away at Radstock.
If you're thinking, Tool Station, I know they'll save me money, but do they have all the top brands? You know, DeWalt, Makita, Einhell, Stanley, Myra, Kudox, Nest and Santex. Yeah, they do. Over 15,000 trade quality products in the range from the leading brands with prices that are hard to beat. If you want a helping hand to save on your next job, try Tool Station. With over 300 branches, there's always a Tool Station near you.
Now, with a short break to consume a large amount of chocolate, we then kicked off again on Monday, the 22nd of April. Of course, that's Easter Bank Holiday Monday, and we're shamelessly picking from the top table, aren't we, in the Premier Division on this one, Tom? And we're going to kick off with Cribbs. They were at home to High Flying Bitton. Yeah,
Bitton obviously potentially not seen in the same light as Willand and Parkway at the moment, but they are absolutely in this title race. A 3-0 win for them away at Cribbs. I think the toughest game on paper for them of the three sides who played yesterday afternoon. And another fantastic win for Bitton. I can't believe they're still sitting third, but they are at this stage. And it was Ben Bammont, another, talking of incredible, he's had a brilliant season in front of goal. And he scored a hat-trick for the away side. the first coming in the first half, and then twice in the final 15 minutes. So there was only a 1-goal deficit for much of the game, but yeah, Bitten pushing on towards the end, and Bamont scoring twice in the closing stages to wrap up the victory. The second of those, a brilliant overhead kick. I think there's a few images at least on social media doing the rounds. So if you could check that out, if you want to, then that's possible. But yeah, another brilliant win for Bitten, and they very much keep up with the top two.
Now, moving on to the next in this 3-horse race, and it is, of course, Plymouth Parkway. They had a tricky trip into Somerset where they had to take on Shepton Mallet.
They did, and they had to take on Tyson Pollard, who obviously we mentioned earlier in the show, and they managed to keep him out. A 2-0 win for Plymouth Parkway away from home, so a clean sheet and another good afternoon in front of goal for them. And it was goals either side of the break, helping them to victory. Shane Crack in the first half before Adam Carter. He's seems to be scoring more often than not. He scored after the break to hand them a 2-0 win and maintain their position at the top of the table going into the final week.
And finally, the third of our top 3 sides, Willand Rovers against Wellington. It's the Clive Jones derby.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in Willand. He manages Wellington. How did he get on in this one, Tom?
Not too well. A 3-0 defeat for Wellington. Obviously, they had their victory on Good Friday, but very much beaten by the better side on Monday. Willand running out 3-0 victors, and it was goals from Brad Orsden, Luke Olden, and then pretty late on it was Dean Stamp wrapping up a third. And a big win at Silver Street, leaving Willand, I'm not going to say the driver's seat. They've got 2 games they've still got to win, and obviously exceedingly tough fixtures, but we'll look ahead to that. But they continue their winning run, and a 3-0 win for them over Wellington.
Excellent stuff. Now we move on to the First Division, and we kick off with the Battle of the Bishops.
Yeah, indeed, and down at Coffelston Road, which is becoming of late, it's become a bit of a fortress for Bishop's Lydiard. A 3-0 win over Bishop Sutton, giving them their 5th successive victory at home. Pretty impressive record to end the season. I hope to take that into 2020. And it was great finishes from Ryan Brereton in either half, helping them to victory in this one with debutant Cahal Robertson, and adding a brilliant free kick, which is definitely on social media because I checked that out yesterday. He completed the scoring, and another really good win for Bishop's Lydiard.
Well, we haven't had a chat with the Bishop Sutton manager yet on the podcast this season, so I thought whilst the weeks and the matches ebb away, it was a good time to get Sam Downs on the phone. And we started our conversation by reflecting on what's been a challenging season for the Somerset club.
We seem to have been a bit of an up and down season, where we seem to get some good results against the top 8 sides, but don't seem to get the results that we want with the teams in and around us. But it's been difficult for us as a side, especially when I first took over, trying to get the same squad of players to try and build, to get the same continuity with the same team. It's been very difficult.
Because you took over mid-season, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Took over mid-season, just before Christmas. We're going through a period where a couple of our players were sort of getting poached off us from a few teams above, which obviously you can't do too much about when the team above you sort of looking to get your sort of best players. So I sort of took over trying and keep them players at the club, but unfortunately didn't manage to keep all of them. Managed to keep a good bunch of them, which still have sort of 6 and 7 of them players now, which obviously is great, but then sort of had to rebuild a whole squad sort of over that Christmas period, which was quite difficult to do, but it's also been quite enjoyable.
So if we look at the fixtures that have just gone, obviously we've had the bank holiday weekend double header, and on Monday you came up against Bishop's Lydiard. It was the Battle of the Bishops. You came off second best. Was 3-0 a fair scoreline, do you think?
Personally, first half, we sort of conceded an early goal after 6 minutes with a mistake. Sort of switched off at the back. But then sort of we went in at half-time feeling that we should have probably been level in the game. And then came out in the second half quite confident. And Bishop Lydiard's goalkeeper made a great save at 1-0 to keep sort of Bishop Lydiard in the lead. But then Bishop scored 2 unbelievable goals in the second half. One was from a dead ball, from 25 yards out straight into the top corner, give our keeper no chance. And then their third one was probably even better. It was sort of on a left foot strike, hit the crossbar 3 times, bounced on the line and went straight in. So it was couldn't really do much about it. But overall, Bishop was probably the better team on the day, and they deserved 3 points. But like I said, at half time, fine lines at this level. And it's they had the rub of the green on the day, really.
Now, you fared much better against Cheddar on Good Friday. Of course, Cheddar, high-flying Cheddar, they were at the time they were still going for the league title. So, which is the real Bishop Sutton? The Bishop Sutton that turned up against Cheddar, or the Bishop Sutton that lost out in the Battle of the Bishops?
We'd love to say that we're the team who played against Cheddar on the Friday. Because we seem to do very well against the teams who are at the top in fighting for the top 6 for the FA Cup and stuff. And we seem to raise our game against them teams. Which, if we turn up like we did on Friday against Cheddar, we can beat anybody in the league. But it's like I said earlier in the call, it's the inconsistent of the squad, the players, which makes it quite difficult going down to Bishop. But yeah, so it's difficult, but like I said, it's just getting that squad together to work with, and then we can push on with that squad. But yeah, if we were the team we were against Cheddar, we'd probably be out there as well with most of the other teams.
Just moving away from Bishop Sutton now, and just thinking about Cheddar and Keynsham. I mean, Keynsham have already secured the league title. Are they your 2 standout teams this season, or has any other sides caught your eye?
Yeah, I think you looking at the league, you can tell both teams out there with great a battle throughout the whole season. They've both been up there, and it's not just been this season. It's been the last couple of seasons they've been building something good at Cheddar and good at Keynsham as well. Which you can see that this year that they are the 2 outstanding teams in the league. Which you can only say that it's only going to be one of them 2 who's going to win the league, if you know what I mean. But yeah, they've both got solid back four. They've got a creative midfield which like to get on the ball and confident, and they've got players up front who can put the ball in the back of the net, which is quite difficult to find at this level.
You've got Welton Rovers away on Saturday. That's your last league game of this campaign. Are you? I assume you're looking to finish on a high.
Yeah, so we're looking to go into Saturday's game in enjoy the game, because the last couple of weeks, the last 10 games have been quite pressurised in the sense of obviously a bit of a battle down there. We've only lost 3 of our last 10, and we can play with a little bit of freedom on Saturday, where we know we're safe now, where we can enjoy the game more so than anything. Obviously,
you've got that game on Saturday, but have you started to think about next season already?
Yes, been thinking about obviously looking last couple of weeks and stuff with trying to get different players back, getting players back into the club, which I know from previous experience being at the club, and trying to get lads that are committed from this season to try and look for next season. But my circumstances have changed slightly because my wife's pregnant, so I've also got to make sure that next season, if it's me doing it or whoever's going to be coming in to do it, needs to make sure I've got a strong team behind me which I can trust and I can push forward with, and have that side of my life sorted before I make any decisions, really.
And one final question for you, Sam. Obviously, this is the first time we've spoken to you on the podcast, so can you tell us a little bit about your footballing journey? What's led you to the Bishop Sutton dugout? I
started with Bishop Sutton 7 years ago when they won the league. Stayed around the football club, got involved with the backroom staff at the club as well. Started with just doing a little bit of coaching and stuff. Got involved with the assistant management role, whilst I was playing, because I was always interested in doing the coaching side of it. And then, obviously got the opportunity this year to manage the team, to try and learn a little bit more about that side of the game, which I'll be the first person to say not everything's gone to plan this year, but I've enjoyed every single bit of the challenge, and I've learned an awful lot on the way, which is only going to put me in good stead going forward as a manager and a player, because as a player, you see it on Saturday, you turn out, you play your game, and that's what you have to worry about. But as a manager, everything else you have to worry about obviously how the game's planning out, what you need to do next, how you're going to change different scenarios. So yeah, I've learned quite a lot in that scenario, really.
And my thanks to Sam for his time. Now we move on to another one of the top sides in the First Division. Still a team with everything to play for, coming up against one of the form sides in the First Division. Cheddar taking on Corsham Town.
Yeah, two of our top sides. I mean, Cheddar coming out a 3-2 victor over Corsham, but yeah, very much having to do it the hard way, coming from 2 goals down, and it was the away side winning 6 on the bounce coming into this one, so they were probably carrying the better form. And yeah, it was Ben Pring scoring either side of the interval that gave them a 2-goal lead, and probably it looked like it had set them up for another win. But Cheddar, with plenty still to play for, as you mentioned, they hit back, and it was their usual goal getters who came to the fore in this one. Adam Wright firing home a free kick to reduce the arrears before Adam Jones, his strike partner, beat 3 defenders on his way to goal before slotting in an equaliser. And then it was the 5th and final goal of the game, went to Cheddar, and it went to Mr. Wright. So yeah, a long-range lob nestling in the back of the net, and yeah, handing Cheddar a 3-2 win in a fantastic game. And so yeah, they ran out 3-2 victors over Corsham. And
finally, in the First Division, we can't let this episode of the podcast go without doffing our cap to our new First Division champions. It's Keynsham Town. They had to get something from their game against Ashton and Backwell, Tom, and I suppose I've let the cat out of the bag by telling you that they're the champions.
They are indeed. Maximum points. A 2-1 win at home to Ashton and Backwell. Obviously not the easiest of opponents for them. In what is always a tough game to get over the finishing line, as Norwich are showing at the moment in the Championship, a couple of draws recently. But Keynsham managing to get the job done, a 2-1 win, and yeah, but it was obviously a tough battle with Cheddar over the past couple of months. But they'll be plying their trade in the Premier Division next year. Keynsham, another good win. Scott Saunders putting them ahead in the 20th minute, and then a second pretty soon after from Matt Brown from the penalty spot. So yeah, giving them a 2-0 lead. Ashton did manage to get one 10 minutes from time, obviously setting up a pretty nervy finish for Keynsham. But yeah, with the really big crowd there to wheel them on, they managed to do it. And yeah, as you say, celebrations I'm sure have begun, and they are the First Division champions. So congratulations to Keynsham.
Yes, congratulations to everybody at Keynsham Town, especially their manager, John Allen, who's been very supportive of the podcast this season. Of course, we had John on last week, and had I had my crystal ball and a little bit more forethought, I would have held that one over to this week so John could have reflected on a job well done. But as is the case with many of our managers, it's not always easy to get hold of them, and it took quite some doing for me to find some time to speak to John, which I'm really pleased we did do last week. But I think that we need to give him an opportunity to reflect thoroughly on the season without the pressure of the weight of expectation on his shoulders, which of course it very clearly was last week. But hopefully we'll get him on in the next couple of weeks and give him an opportunity to really reflect on a job well done for Keynsham, a side that had been there or thereabouts for quite some time and finally managed to get over the line. And we will of course be talking about all matters to do with promotion and relegation shortly on the podcast. We will be having a look at both league tables, but before we do that, we'll have a quick look at the fixtures coming up. It's our last round of fixtures. Now I will be getting Tom's take on the top fixtures for Saturday, April the 27th. We don't tend to dwell too much in the midweek games, simply because the vast majority of people who listen to the podcast, we know, don't tend to listen before the midweek games have been played. But there are 2 very important midweek games coming up this week of all weeks. Wednesday the 24th of April in the Premier Division, Willand Rovers, they have their game in hand. It's at home. It's against Bridgewater Town. It's a 7:30 kickoff, and of course, if they win that match, they will return to the top of the Premier Division table with a big game coming up at the weekend. In the First Division, a side looking at completely the different end of the Western League, and it's Chippenham Park. They're at home. It's their game in hand as well. The visitors are Caen Town, near neighbours, and of course, we know how well Caen have been doing this season, but Chippenham Park really need to get something from that match to lift them out of the bottom 2. But we will take a look ahead to our last round of fixtures. It's Saturday the 27th of April. Tom, what takes your eye in the Premier Division?
There's only one game. I mean, as luck would have it, two of our Premier Division title chasers meet. We've got Bitton versus Willand. Obviously, as you say, we are recording before Willand's midweek game, so that plays a huge part in what will be at stake on Saturday. But we do know these two teams, whatever the case, will be will be capable of winning the title on Saturday afternoon. So what a colossus match we have on our hands. I expect a pretty huge crowd to be down there. And I mean, it doesn't really get bigger. Obviously, Bitton. But both teams carrying huge form into this one. There will be so much on the line. So yeah, that takes my eye straight away.
And for me, I shall be going for the other show in town. It's Chipping Sodbury against Plymouth Parkway. Plymouth obviously need Bitton to do them some kind of favour on Saturday if they're going to take the title. But of course, they've got to get past Chipping Sodbury Town first, and Chipping Sodbury have been known to pull the odd cat out of the bag. So certainly the tension, you couldn't write it. It's got more drama than Downton Abbey. Now moving on to the First Division, and there's still plenty to play for in the First Division. Tom, what game tickles your fancy down there?
Yeah, so I think we're looking at the other end of the table in the First Division. It looks, well, obviously Bristol Telephones confirmed relegation, unfortunately, following another defeat on Easter Monday. But we've got Chippenham Park and Oldland, who drew 2-2 yesterday. One of them had each had the chance to take a big stride in saving themselves, but neither quite managed it. Chippenham Park coming from 2 goals down to claim the 2-2 draw, and they now both have huge games on the weekend, both away from home. So Oldland are away at Calne, and Chippenham Park are away at Warminster, which is obviously a very tough encounter. So I think Chippenham Park will definitely be needing something from that midweek game, which you've just mentioned. So yeah, those are the two matches with the most at stake on Saturday.
And I'm going to go for a game at the opposite end of the table. Portishead are already safe, but Cheddar really need to win every match they possibly can. Their fight is not with any other sides in the Western League. It is on that points per game basis will govern whether or not they are promoted into our Premier Division. And with that in mind, they will need to get maximum points against Portishead to stay in the hunt for promotion. And that really is a nice little segue into doing the league tables. Plenty to talk about, even though many of the matters of promotion and relegation have seemingly been resolved. Tom, do you want to take us through the runners and the riders in the Premier Division?
Yeah, lots at stake, as we mentioned. Lots to break down. So, obviously, as we mentioned, Willand still with that game in hand against 4th place Bridgewater, so not an easy one on Wednesday. But so as things stand at the top of the Premier Division, following the Easter fixtures, we've got Plymouth Park, where they're top, 37 games played, so 1 remaining. They have 92 points. We've got Willand then in second, 36 games played. They're on 91. With Bitton also on 91. They've played 37. Goal difference-wise, Willand looking like the team that could, if it came down to that, which, if it could, they've got a pretty hefty goal difference advantage over their 2 rivals. So, that's how things ride at the top of the Premier Division. Bridgewater, as we say, in 4th, 2 games remaining, they've got 78 points, and then Westbury, they're comfortably in 5th with 71 points. So as we say, little blip towards the end of the season, but they've had a fantastic first season in the Premier Division. At the bottom, it's Shortwood, 37 games played. They have the 9 points, and then Hengrove also relegation this season, unfortunately. 37 games, 21 points, and then Brislington and Roman Glass St George just doing enough. They're on 28 points and 31 points, respectively.
One thing I noticed about looking at the form tables, you can see that there is a stats page on the Toolstation Western League website. And one of the interesting things about the form tables is that Bitton are, I would say, the form team out of the 3 at the top of the Premier Division, on the grounds that in the last 6 matches they've only drawn 1. They've won the rest. Willand Rovers, of course, have won 5, but they've lost 1. And then if you look at Plymouth Parkway, they've drawn 2 in the last 6. So that does mean that Bitton are the form team. But really, whether or not there's enough football to be played between now and the end of the season for that to make a massive difference to Bitton only remains to be seen. Really, it really is. You couldn't predict it, but as you said earlier in the podcast, Tom, they're well and truly in the race, and it is a fascinating 3-horse race. So much rests on that game between Willand and Bridgewater, but of course, despite the result there, it doesn't really doesn't really matter. It's going to go down to the final day. I've been doing a little bit of homework.
Oh, good. I always like it when you do that.
And I know. Normally, I'll let you do all the heavy lifting, but I mean, this does have the potential to get me in horrendous trouble, quite possibly even with the Western League, and most certainly with the Football Association. So I'll choose my words carefully. But to the best of my knowledge, only one side will be promoted out of the Premier Division. Now, that probably won't come as news to many of the people listening to this. The reason I say it is because that, of course, last season the top two went up into the Southern League. Now, there were certain issues surrounding whether two teams could be promoted, but on this occasion, my understanding is that only the top team will be promoted. In terms of the fate of the bottom two, to the best of my knowledge, again, I believe that it is the case that Hengrove and Shortwood United will not be playing their football in the Premier Division next season. Now, I know that to some will sound like stating the obvious. In seasons gone by, of course, they would have been simply relegated into the First Division. But we don't live in simple times, and we live in the brave new world of the Football Association's reorganisation, and that does include the prospect of lateral movement, which means that they could end up being put into a different league system. Now, in fairness, actually, that's a fate that could affect pretty much any side in the Western League, as we saw last season, when, of course, Almondsbury were taken out of the First Division and moved into the Hellenic League. So, not the matters of promotion and relegation, not always quite as simple as we would like to believe, and believing in the final league table, which is, of course, really how we would all like these matters to be resolved. But if you think that's complicated, which in fairness it isn't, it does start to get even more complicated when we go down to the First Division. Keynsham have been crowned as our champions, Tom, but how are things stacking up below them?
So, in second place, obviously, Cheddar, 37 games played, so one remaining. They're on 84 points. So, obviously, Keynsham have reached the 90-point barrier with their one game remaining. So, they've, 90 points from their 37 games. Cheddar, 6 points further back in second. Corsham are then definitely going to finish third. They played 37. They're on 69 points, which is absolutely fantastic effort, and that sets them up really well for next season. And then the two teams that are battling for fourth on the final day, we've got Longwell Green and Ashton and Backwell United. Both played 37, both on 64 points. So brilliant tallies for them. And then Chard on 60 points, and Warminster, who've made a fantastic effort over the second half of the season. They're on 59 points with one game remaining. So, that's how it looks. That's the top seven. And then at the bottom, obviously, as we mentioned, Bristol Telephones, they are relegated, 37 games played, and they have 24 points. Chippenham Park, then 36. Obviously, their game in hand in midweek plays a huge bearing on who will eventually go down. They've got 31 points currently, and then a further point ahead of them is Oldland, 37 games played, 32 points. So their game on Easter Monday against one another really was absolutely huge, and ended in a stalemate. So that's those two are the two that can still get relegated mathematically, and obviously Bishop Sutton, Portishead and Radstock doing just enough to survive the drop.
Absolutely. Now, of course, matters of promotion and relegation in the First Division even more complicated, as I said, than in the Premier. We know that Keynsham are up. That's banked. You can bet your house on that. That's not changing. But the fate of Cheddar is something that is yet to be resolved. All we can say is that Cheddar just got to keep winning. If they can keep winning, then they put themselves in a good position to be promoted, but there's no guarantees. Of course, back in the day, finishing second in the First Division was enough to guarantee a place in the Premier Division. But again, these matters have been taken into the hands of the Football Association, who are undergoing quite a major restructuring around the country. This isn't just related to our league or indeed our region. And of course, matters at the bottom of the table. We've been talking about Bristol Telephones, and we don't know whether it'll be Oldland Abertonians or Chippenham Park that will join them in those bottom two positions. But even finishing bottom two, as we know from Portishead and Warminster last season, is no guarantee of relegation out of the Western League. These matters are resolved by the league's committee that meets in the second week of May, and they will look at some recommendations based on the rules set out by the Football Association that govern promotion and relegation across the National League system, and they will consider what that means. Now, of course, if those matters are relatively straightforward, then actually. We can sort of anticipate what might go on. But of course, there are under certain circumstances, all bets are off, and that really is largely affected by whether teams go out of business or as we know has happened with Street recently. Of course, Street, champions of our league last season, have reapplied, have applied for relegation, voluntary relegation from the Southern League. So those issues affect the league system across the board, and they're like ripples in a pond. They don't necessarily have to impact immediately on the Western League, but matters of promotion, if concentrated in certain regions, could spill out across the country, pushing sides laterally into other divisions if ultimately too many or too few teams have been promoted or relegated into those systems. One of the things we do know is that come hell or high water next season, there will be 20 teams in the Premier Division and 20 teams in the First Division. We won't be getting a situation where we go back up to 22 in the First, I am assured. But really, other than the fact that the Leagues Committee will look at the situation in the second week of May, it's very difficult to know whether Cheddar are going up or indeed whether Bristol Telephones AN and AN Other are going down. But of course, we will do our best to keep you abreast of these developments as they happen. Very exciting time for all of these clubs in some respects. Also nail biting for others who've worked so hard this season to try and secure their position in the league, or perhaps achieve promotion to another, and aren't yet able to celebrate. We've heard in recent weeks from managers who find that situation very, very frustrating indeed, and our sympathy is with them. But it's one of those things where these matters perhaps aren't being at the moment at least aren't being settled on the football pitch. But anyway, we'll see whether that situation develops over the coming weeks. Anyway, that's enough from me. We'll have plenty to talk about on next week's podcast, won't we, Tom? But I mean, we've been reviewing not one but two of your bulletins.
Oh yeah, a couple. Yeah, pretty busy Easter period. Obviously, got one out on Friday evening, and then also on Monday evening. So a couple of bulletins on the website, both downloadable as PDFs and Word documents. So yeah, they should both be fully loaded onto the Toolstation Western League website.
And have you penned your column for this week's non-league paper?
Yeah, so that was looking back on Good Friday Premier Division fixtures. So that went in the paper for Sunday. So that would have been in the Step 5 and 6 section. Yeah.
Excellent stuff. Now, Tom, next week we look forward to bringing the listeners the exciting conclusion to this season's Toolstation Western League. But from Tom and myself, you have been listening to the Toolstation Western League podcast.